Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will offer an update on the case of Abigail Zwerner. First I'll look at the background, including the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. In 2023, 25-year-old Abigail Zwerner was a first-grade teacher at Rich Neck Elementary School in Newport News, Virginia. She had only been teaching for about 2 years, and all her experience was at this particular school. Abigail probably earned somewhere around $55,000 to $60,000 a year. The assistant principal at Rich Neck Elementary was a woman named Dr. Ebony Parker. She had worked for the district since 2008 and had been the assistant principal for about 2 years. Her salary was approximately $75,000. The school had encountered some difficulties with a student whose name has never been released. In court proceedings, he was referred to as JT, so I will use the same reference. JT's mother, Deja Nicole Taylor, has been described as a habitual drug user. His father, who has not been named, has been described as having a criminal record. During the 2021-2022 school year, JT was in kindergarten, where he exhibited disruptive behavior. For example, he would get in the faces of other students, brag that he had access to marijuana, and would occasionally strike a counselor with his fist when removed from the classroom. On September 27, 2021, JT struck a teacher named Susan and later attempted to strangle her from behind while she was seated in a child-sized chair. A teacher assistant pulled JT off her after noticing Susan was struggling to breathe. Based on his behavior, JT was like Chucky from the horror movie series, except not quite as docile. As a result of this incident, the school administration sent JT to an early childhood center. In a curious and baffling move, JT was allowed to return to Rich Neck Elementary in the fall of 2022 as a first-grade student. This was permitted despite his failure to complete kindergarten, a reading level below his peers, and his significant and terrifying behavioral problems. During this school year, the school had a new principal, but Ebony was still the assistant principal. There were 2 first-grade teachers, Abigail Zwerner in classroom 11 and Jennifer West in classroom 13 across the hall. JT was placed in Abigail's class and quickly found himself in trouble. For example, he used profanity, tried to strangle another student, and chased students around the playground with a belt. JT was subjected to a process called Student Success Team, or SST, which is a plan that was designed to help him. This plan involved reduced hours in school, spending time with a reading specialist named Amy Kovac, taking medication for ADHD, and having one of his parents with him during the day at school. Starting on January 3, 2023, an adjustment to the SST took effect, which no longer required a parent to be with him in school. On the next day, January 4, JT grabbed Abigail's cell phone, held it high in the air, and slammed it into the floor. The screen protector was broken as a result. He told Abigail, "I'm never coming back to your room again, you blank." The blank is a word that rhymes with pitch. JT was taken across the hall to classroom 13, where he pinched Jennifer West repeatedly, saying, "I can do this, and I will." The penalty for JT's behavior was a 1-day suspension from school. He returned to school on January 6, 2023. According to Abigail, both JT and his mother apologized for the cell phone incident that occurred 2 days earlier. As it turns out, there was good reason to doubt JT's sincerity, considering how he was in the possession of a semi-automatic pistol, which he had removed from his mother's purse. Based on a photograph of the pistol taken later by the police, it appears to be a Taurus G3C chambered in 9mm Luger. This pistol is positioned as a budget, compact 9mm with a price of around $300. The weapon was loaded with 8 cartridges, 7 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. Unfortunately, nobody at the school knew about the pistol at this time. When JT was at lunch, he threatened to beat up a kindergarten student. Abigail told Ebony that JT was in a violent mood. Ebony did not even bother to look away from her computer monitor or to acknowledge that Abigail was standing there. After Abigail left, Ebony told the reading specialist, Amy Kovac, that Amy could tell Abigail that Abigail could call JT's mother at any time so he could be picked up early. As Amy was walking in the hallway, two students approached her and told her that JT had a gun in his backpack. This was the first time any staff member was made aware of the pistol. Amy walked into Abigail's classroom and sat next to JT and asked him if he had a gun. When he told her no, she asked him if he could look in his backpack. JT once again responded no. Amy sat next to him for 45 minutes and watched him, but did not search his backpack. She reported to Ebony that JT would not grant permission to have his backpack searched, and he was not throwing the backpack around as he usually did. Ebony did not show concern, ask any questions, or take any action. Sometime between 12:20 and 12:30 p.m., Abigail saw JT take something out of his backpack and put it in the pocket of his hoodie. Concerned that it might be a weapon, she told Amy about what she observed. At this time, Amy searched the backpack, but didn't find the pistol because JT moved it to his pocket. Amy reported to Ebony that Abigail had seen JT remove an object from his backpack before recess. Ebony responded, "He has little pockets." At recess, JT kept running behind a rock wall with a friend and was out of view of the teachers. Not long after 1 p.m., when recess ended, the first grade teacher, Jennifer West, approached the friend and asked him about his interaction with JT. The friend, who by this point was physically shaking, told her that JT had shown him a firearm. Jennifer kept the friend in her classroom because he was afraid of JT. She called the school office and spoke to a music teacher named John Sims, who was covering while the receptionist was at lunch. Jennifer told John about what she had discovered. John indicated that he would inform Ebony Parker. At 1:11 p.m., John called Jennifer back and told her that Ebony was aware of the threat, but JT's backpack had already been searched. Jennifer repeated her concern that JT was in the possession of a firearm. At this point, Jennifer had a counselor named Rolando Rawls stop by her classroom, where JT's friend informed him of what he had witnessed. Rolando approached Ebony and requested permission to search JT, but that request was denied. Ebony explained that JT's mother would be arriving soon to pick him up. It appears as though she wanted his mother to deal with the situation instead of having to deal with it herself. At 1:59 p.m., while JT was 6 feet away from Abigail in classroom 11, he retrieved his mother's Taurus pistol from his pocket and pointed it at Abigail. She responded by saying, "What are you doing with that?" JT then discharged the weapon one time. The bullet passed through Abigail's left hand and traveled into her upper chest. JT, who had an emotionless expression on his face, attempted to fire the pistol a second time, but it did not discharge. The weapon had failed to cycle properly due to JT's weak grip on it. Abigail escorted her students out of the classroom despite being shot. The reading specialist, Amy Kovac, entered the classroom after hearing the gunshot, pulled JT away from the pistol, and held him. JT said, "I shot that blank dead. I got my mom's gun last night." The blank rhymes with the word pitch. When the assistant principal, Dr. Ebony Parker, heard about the shooting, she immediately ran into her office and closed the door. The receptionist was the one who called 911 and declared a lockdown over the PA system, not Ebony. A visitor knocked on Ebony's office door and said there was a child in the main room, but Ebony did not open the door. Officers arrived and seized the pistol from classroom 11. As they were standing there, JT punched Amy Kovac in the face. He told the police that he retrieved the pistol from his mother's purse, the same place where he obtained marijuana. Abigail was transported to a hospital where she spent 2 weeks. Her long recovery involved 6 surgeries. Abigail never regained full use of her left hand, and the bullet is still lodged in her chest. She never returned to teaching and instead became a licensed cosmetologist. JT was too young to be charged with a crime, but his mother was charged. She ultimately pleaded guilty to illegally obtaining and possessing a firearm and making a false statement during the purchase of a firearm. Her sentence was 21 months in federal prison. Dr. Ebony Parker also faced criminal charges. In April 2024, she was indicted on 8 counts of gross, wanton, or reckless care for a child, 1 count for every cartridge that was in the pistol JT possessed. Abigail filed a $40 million lawsuit against the Newport News School Board and 3 former district officials. All the parties were dismissed except for Ebony Parker. On November 6, 2025, a jury awarded Abigail $10 million. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Ebony Parker has not yet been tried for the criminal charges. The civil trial occurred first. The question during that trial was, did Ebony breach a duty to care with gross negligence? Abigail's attorney argued that a gun changed everything and demanded a response from Ebony that she failed to deliver. Ebony's attorney argued that Ebony did not have any duty to protect Abigail. Even if she did, the school district had adopted a team approach, and other people failed to stop JT. No one person was fully responsible for the disaster. Furthermore, having a 6-year-old shoot a teacher is unprecedented and therefore very difficult to predict. This is a decent argument, but I think Ebony had too many inculpatory factors stacked against her. For example, she was in a position of authority. She knew about the past disciplinary problems of JT and was an active participant in the decisions that led him to being in Classroom 11. On 4 occasions, Ebony was warned that JT may have a gun, yet she did nothing. And she had a reputation for demeaning teachers and downplaying their concerns. Item number 2, when Ebony goes on trial for the criminal charges, I believe she has a pretty good chance of being convicted. However, there are 2 elements working in her favor for that trial. First, the burden of proof is much higher in a criminal trial. Instead of a preponderance of the evidence, it is beyond a reasonable doubt. Second, the charge that she is facing requires a reckless disregard for human life, which is a higher standard than gross negligence. Ebony has a better chance of beating the criminal case than she did the civil one, but I wouldn't recommend planning an exoneration party quite yet. Item number 3, JT ended up in the care of his great-grandfather, a retired U.S. Army drill sergeant named Calvin Taylor. Calvin told the media that when JT was 5 years old, he took his mother's car keys, started her vehicle, and crashed it into 2 parked vehicles. Calvin is angry with his granddaughter Deja, as well as all the government agencies that failed her and JT. For example, social services. He insisted JT would not be defined by the shooting and said the boy's grades were good. He loved to cook, and he hoped to learn to ride a horse one day. Who knows what the future will bring for JT? Maybe things will work out fine, and he will end up being a lawyer, an engineer, a PhD, or a CEO. I think this is unlikely based on his shockingly early history of extreme violence and his abject contempt for other human beings. But anything is possible. Item number 4, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. This case primarily involves 2 individuals who failed to supervise JT and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. The first was JT's mother, Deja. She used substances and left a loaded pistol within JT's reach. Even if Deja somehow did not know that giving a 6-year-old access to a gun was a bad idea, she was aware that JT had severe behavioral problems. For example, he allegedly started her car and drove it into 2 other cars when he was 5 years old. There was no excuse for Deja's behavior, and prison is the right place for her. The second person who failed JT was Dr. Ebony Parker. She was lazy, indifferent, and arrogant. It's like she believed that she was too important to be bothered by the reports that JT was in the possession of a firearm. I think that Ebony was simply hoping the entire matter would resolve without her having to do anything. If she could just stall until JT's mother arrived to pick him up, she could pass the problem down the line. This is, unfortunately, a common behavior with school administrators. However, most of them would still take action if a gun was involved. There's only so much laziness these administrators are willing to exhibit. Ebony was pushing the limit. In a way, she was a pioneer, exploring innovative methods to take laziness to new heights. Those are my thoughts on the case of Abigail Zwerner. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.